Good evening, everyone. I'm Thane Rosenbaum. I'm the creative director of the Forum on Life, Culture, and Society at Touro University. And welcome to the FOLCS Conversation series. Tonight, the documentary short that has been nominated for an Academy Award. So if you're tuning in on Sunday night, you could be rooting for this film. It's Stranger at the Gate. It is a film that's arresting, compelling, and frankly will change you. It's a documentary short, so many of you have already seen it. You can see it on the website. It is a film about a ex-Marine, spent 25 years in the Marines, and returns home to Indiana. And while there, clearly struggling with PTSD, decides that there's one more thing that was left undone in his military career. He plans to bomb the local mosque. And there are reasons for that, which we'll discuss tonight. He makes a reconnaissance visit. He plans for this, makes a reconnaissance visit. And the minute he walks into this Islamic center, he's welcomed as a brother. And he's shocked by it. They reach out to him. There's affection shown to him. And suddenly he's changed. And he keeps coming back. And eventually he converts to Islam. And at some point, he became the president of the Islamic Center for 2 years. It is a powerful film, especially in an era nowadays with great increased spiking crime for hate crimes and in Islamophobia. The film in 30 minutes is a tutorial on mutual caring and connection. Joining us tonight to discuss the film is the subject himself, Richard McKinney. He goes by the name Mac. Hey, Mac, how are you doing? Welcome. Thank you. We also have the film's director, Joshua Seftel. Joshua is an Emmy and P.T.S.D nominated and award winner and nominee. He's also made one feature film, War Inc., which I just told him I really liked. I remember the film. This film, Stranger at the Gate, is part of a 7-year series that he's been undertaking called The Secret Life of Muslims Project, and it's intended to use film as a way to combat Islamophobia. And our last guest is one of the executive producers for the film, who is a colleague of mine at Touro University, Dr. Conrad Fischer, who, in addition to being a professor of medicine here at Touro University, a distinguished one at that, he's also a reverend with a specialty in religious violence. Gentlemen, welcome to the FOLCS Film Series.
Because you're saying that, I feel more distinguished.
Well, you can always call me and I'll tell you. If you need a boost, Richard, you can always Conrad, you can always call me. If you're watching us live on YouTube, welcome. Make sure you go to folks.org and give us your email address. So we can give you advance notice of events. If you have a question for either Conrad or Mac or Joshua, leave it in the Q&A box. There's so many things to talk about. It may be a documentary short, but it's long and on ideas, very long on ideas, and we only have less than an hour now. So let's just talk briefly about something we rarely get a chance to do, which is an Academy Award nomination. We've done that a few times over the last 16 years, but certainly not in a documentary short. Congratulations for that, Joshua and Conrad. Will both of you be in Los Angeles on Sunday night?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Oh, you're in Los Angeles.
I just got here today, and I think Conrad is coming soon. We'll be in attendance at the 95th annual Academy Awards, and Mac is going to be coming too.
Oh wow,
and,
great, terrific.
Yeah, so all of us will be there, among other people, including Bibi Barami, who is one of the heroes of the film.
Absolutely.
So we'll be here to celebrate and to celebrate this nomination.
So in addition to the screening options on the website, Stranger at the Gate, will there be and have there been actual screenings as in commercial releases or film festivals? Have we had that? And since that goes back to old school film watching, what has been the reaction to the film from those actual live audience presentations?
Well, we've had many screenings, over 80 screenings at festivals and special screenings, and Conrad and Richard have been in attendance at the majority of them, or many of them. We also, the film is currently playing in movie theaters across the country. I don't know how many, I think it's 600 movie theaters right now.
And these are they art house films that would actually show, they're dedicated to short films, documentaries, and this like this?
It's the package of
Absolutely not. We're going up against Avatar.
It's the Oscar shorts. So they every year those are shown in.
I see. So you're getting a live screening of all the nominees. I see.
Yep.
One last question on process, because I think it is interesting to some people. Did you consider, I know that the New Yorker is either a co-producer in some way. Was there some consideration to making this a full-length documentary? And if not, was, as a filmmaker, and you are very much a seasoned filmmaker on all formats, frankly, you must have made some kind of aesthetic and documentarian executive decision that said Mac's story and the Islamic Center is a 30-minute film.
No offense to Mac, because it's a big story. But we started it as a short because, well, partly because that was how much money we had. You know, we didn't have, a feature doc can cost 7 figures. And sometimes with a short, you can really get it off the ground with very little money. So we were in that latter category. And you know, Conrad was one of the people who, the first person who really came in and said, I want to support this film. And so we filmed it pretty quickly because you know, we wanted to we had limited resources, but when we started editing it, the first cut of the film was actually like 50 minutes. And technically a short is anything under 40 minutes. So, and a feature is, you know, usually you want to be over 60, 65 so we were kind of right in the middle. And we thought, do we make this longer and make it into a feature, or do we make it shorter and make it into a short? And ultimately, there was that moment where we entertained the thought, like, maybe this is a feature. And as we worked on it more and more, and we trimmed away, we felt that the story got tighter and more cogent, and we just leaned into the short film, and it ended up being 29 minutes long.
So in the world in which we live, coming off a pandemic, and a world that features in a lot of violence and wars and genocides and ethnic cleansing, you've somehow, the three of you, produced a feel-good movie, a life-affirming movie, the idea of embracing the stranger and learning from the other. And it's interesting because the film, in my mind, goes against the grain of, you know, the kind of divisiveness that we're experiencing in our political culture, in the cynicism we see in our global culture, in the perception that we have of minorities. This film is going against the tide of public opinion about the silos that we are all in and how we're supposed to think about things. You know, we're told on cable news networks, not the news, but we're told how to think about things. And this film, you know, is like, you know, the little engine that could. It just sort of tells you, doesn't tell you what to think. It lets you walk away, but it lets you walk away with in many ways a happy ending. So I want to know what has been the public reaction. Maybe you can all join in on what to you that you found interesting. Have there been objectors? Have there been people that have said, you know, this thing is too Pollyanna for me? You know, where's the dark side of this story? I want the dark side. That's the way I normally see, you know, if I watched Zero Dark 30, if I watch any film about the Iraq War or Afghanistan, if I watch, you know, Sniper, I get a whole nother thing. And I like those movies, right? They'll tell you, I love those movies. And I'm not getting that vibe here. Did anyone say that?
I'll let Conrad, do you want to jump in?
Conrad, you can speak as not just an executive producer, but as a reverend and as a man of science and a physician. Conrad, do you hear us?
I think that's part of what the school stands for. The school's been very supportive, and because the school stands at the conjuncture of science, education, law. Yes. The school
we're having
stands at the
connection
conjunction
problems,
of
Conrad.
science, medicine, law, social work, creativity.
Yeah, go ahead. We got you back. Mac, you've been traveling the country even before there was a film. Is that correct with this message?
Well, yes, and it all was due to the short segment of The Secret Life of Muslims. It was only 5.5 minutes long.
I see. So so the point is,
yeah.
Joshua had already known of you, and had already filmed you for the project.
Yes, correct. Mm-hmm.
And somehow you were part of some larger project. You were a piece of it. And then you got called up from the minor leagues and said, let's make a movie about you. And let's make a whole short doc about you. So
he saw the bigger story, and he wanted to bring the rest of the community, because in the original film, the original video, it was just me. And but there were so many other parts. There were so many other people, my family, the community itself, the Baramis. I mean, there was just so many people that were missing from the story. And Josh had this insight, and he was dead on. I mean, he really came up with a very good story.
So how have people responded to you? Have they, first of all, when you have delivered the message, where are you? Where do you go?
Anywhere anybody asks me, I will go anywhere.
So that includes schools, other religious denominations?
Yes. I've spoke at a synagogue, several churches, of course, many mosques, schools I have not went to yet, but we're still working on that. And I have been to colleges, but the outpouring for this movie, or for this film, has been very, very positive for the most part. You're always going to have people who are going to say nasty things. Josh had told me a long time ago that you could put a video of kittens and puppies on the internet and somebody's going to have something hateful to say. Well, and that's very true. But I do want to bring up one. It was a while ago, and this guy had wrote a comment to the video, and he had said, if a tough guy like you can change the way he thinks about things, I guess I can too. And that right there just hit it. I mean, that was what made everything worthwhile. Every nasty
because
comment.
His point is that your change was so improbable that if you could change, anything can change.
Basically, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Does and with better connectivity, to say that that's the point of being at what used to be Touro College and is now Touro University. The rabbi had a vision. He went from no medical schools, that Touro is now the largest private medical school system in the country. He went from no school to dental, to law, to social work, to undergraduate at a school of Jewish studies in Berlin. That is pretty, what the common people call ballsy, but I would call testicular. So here we have people who are of extraordinarily diverse backgrounds to say that we looked at the effect of film, I did, in the 1950s and 60s. And my biggest motivation myself was to say, I looked at what Leon Uris did with his book Exodus and the film that came from it. And that film is widely credited, not just with bringing Dalton Trumbo out of McCarthyist blacklists, but to change the perception of a religious minority. And this was one of my major motivations for doing the film.
You thought this had the same effect.
Well, it will if I can get friggin' Paul Newman to play back.
Yeah, that's true. In the film, Mac, I can't remember exactly in what connection you said this. I think it's when your daughter comes home from school and says that she's going to school with Muslim children. In one instance, I think a mother came to pick up a child and she was fully covered and only could see her eyes. And this somehow enraged you. And I think you said something in the film, something about beheadings. I think you refer to, I hope I'm not mistaking this, you refer to something like this. And I think what you were describing at that point was to say that this was sort of your image of Islam in your many tours of duty, right? And so that somehow you made a direct connection between Muslims on the battlefield and what you saw and what your daughter would be facing here. Because you did say at some point, sort of a very telling remark, you say something like, I may have retired from the Marines, from the Army, but I wasn't finished as a patriot. That's the idea.
He said, my country may have been finished with me, but I wasn't finished with helping my country.
And it's interesting that that was the way you saw helping your country. To you, the war continued, and it continued here. Is that correct?
Well, yes, I looked at this as another front line, more or less. As far as the beheading, I was referring to myself when I went into the mosque for the first time.
Oh, that's right. What you feared,
Yes.
right? What might happen?
Yeah. I
That
was
you
like,
would be
maybe this
taken
wasn't a good
hostage and
idea.
beheaded, right?
Right.
So that just gives you a sense of, when your tours of duty in Afghanistan and in Iraq, did you ever enter a mosque? Was this the first mosque that you were in? Is it possible that if you had entered a mosque in Kabul, that
Not in Afghanistan, in Iraq.
yeah, you had.
That was a different situation.
Now, again, I think this is important. The situation is different because you're an army that's on their soil, right? Right.
Mhm.
It would be unlikely to be welcomed in the same way. Is that the idea?
The only reason I was there was because people were shooting at me from that building. That was it.
Right.
Because laws of land warfare, we don't mess with other people's religious buildings. We're not supposed to. But,
right. So let's talk a little about men and women at war. You say something that we don't hear very often, which is in order to kill, you're trained to think that the target is nothing but paper, to be sort of desensitized and inured to taking a human life. And although nothing is said in the film, it's assumed that you have done that. You have taken lives. I'm just curious, can you fight a war without being inured and desensitized? In other words, that this is obviously intentional, that you couldn't possibly fight a war if your young soldiers thought that the targets would bleed.
Well, and that's actually brings up a good subject. But to be honest with you, I can only answer that for myself. Mm-hmm. And the answer would be no, I couldn't. Paper target, that was an option that was given to me. There's different tricks, if you want to call it that, of coping, right? And that was one that was presented to me, and it was easy enough.
You're saying that's pretty standard. People are told that.
Well, we're not even told that. I went seeking that information.
I see. So that means you were always conflicted about taking lives?
It got to be, it was a moral question in myself early on in my career,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So Joshua, you've been, around this subject with your camera for a number of years, and obviously you've taken an interest in this. And I'm just wondering, and Conrad, maybe you can jump in as a reverend who studies religious violence. It's interesting because we hear it's the Ibrahims, right? The family.
The Bahramis.
Bahramis, I'm sorry, Bahramis. So we're told by the Bahramis on 9/11 how this affected them, right? And we're hearing from Muslims how it affected them. The news that we heard in the United States, well, first of all, we didn't hear a lot of news like that, right? That Muslims were mortified, horrified, felt enormous sense of, either shame or, we don't hear that. What we did hear is around the world, Muslims celebrating and throwing candy. And so I wonder whether, that's what you're up against when you're dealing with this kind of material. You're up against a very, very strong perception that Islam wholeheartedly supported the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon and celebrated this. And so therefore it was one way to, I guess, look at the enemy, and the enemy could then therefore be local. Could that story have been told better? I know that President Bush, early on, to his credit, said Islam is a religion of peace. By the way, many people were critical of him saying that. But I'm wondering whether that is something that you have confronted in people responding to this film, as if to say, Joshua, give me a break. Seriously, that's the story you're telling?
Well, one of the things that I learned I've been making films about American Muslims for the last 8 years, and I'm Jewish, so it's there's a story behind that, which has to do with me facing anti-Semitism as a boy, and after 9/11, seeing my Muslim friends facing hate and feeling a connection to them and wanting to help in some way. I feel like most of the Muslim people I know, on September 11th or September 12th, their life changed and things were different for them after that. And they were seen differently, they were treated differently, they faced more discrimination.
And do you think I'm just sorry, is that continued in your mind?
I think for some people, I think it depends where you are and who you are, but sure, I think there's still a lot of Islamophobia in this country. I don't know if it's as fervent as it was, and I don't have statistics on that, so I can't speak as an expert. But that was a turning point in people's lives, and this film really focuses in on that moment, that it changed things for our country. It changed things for Muslim people. After that, they were seen differently, and it made life harder for them. And we wanted to look at that and to explore that, because most of the films we've made on this subject, and this is actually the 25th short film that we've made, are narratives that are trying to change that perception and to remind us that some of these negative stereotypes are just incorrect.
Do you think that, and I know you're essentially talking about the heart of your project, right? The whole essence of the Secret Life of Muslims project, but you are a filmmaker. Are you of the view, by the way, I asked this question of many filmmakers over the years, we've had hundreds. Are you of the view that film, whether documentary or feature film, is a way to convey information in a way that's very different from journalism or nonfiction, that in terms of changing minds and hearts, film, obviously you've dedicated yourself to this project. Do you think that film, even in the documentary setting, which is, again, has an aesthetic element to it, but is ultimately a document, is a documentary statement, do you think that it's especially effective in spreading a message that might be harder to achieve otherwise?
I do. I think Well, I think storytelling can be very powerful. And I think that one of the messages of this film is, like, let's talk specifically about one of the heroes in the film, Bibi Barami. When she finds out that someone hates Muslims or that someone hates her, the first thing she does is she invites them over for dinner. And she meets with them face to face, breaks bread with them, gets to know them. And there's a power in that. She understands that there's a power in getting to know the other, as we say. And filmmaking and documentary filmmaking and any kind of filmmaking can achieve a similar thing. We get to, in this film, the viewer gets to know Mac, and they get to know Bibi and Saber, and in a very intimate way, in a way that, the way we filmed all the characters, they're looking right into the lens. They're talking to you, the viewer. And there's a power in that. There's a power in film in that it allows us to get to know people we might not ordinarily get to meet in our everyday life. And I think that's where the power in filmmaking can.
But there's something that, right. But there's something, and maybe Conrad can speak to this. There's something about Bibi. I think she's the one in the film who says that when Mac first enters the center, Mac says that he walks around sort of in an agitated state. And I'm curious whether Conrad, who's, a professor of medicine, would say that when Mac is describing in the film his first entry into the Islamic Center, the mosque, and he's pacing back and forth, that's an actual expression of PTSD. That I'm wondering whether Conrad even believes.
Now you know why it's the conjunction of theology, politics, medicine, psychology. So I originally entered seminary with this distinct goal of studying religious violence, but I entered it because of the attacks upon Christian and Jewish cultures and communities by ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So my master's degree is actually on the writings of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. I'm an expert in religious violence as what their actual journals are. Now, how did we get to Bibi Barami? Because all the great religions teach.
No, I'm sorry. Let's just be clear to the audience. What do you mean by how did we get to her? What does that mean?
How did we get to a movie when you have Mac goes out to defend the United States and says, I'm going to protect the world from dangerous elements by killing people? I go to seminary because ISIS and Al-Qaeda believed that they were protecting the world by ridding the world of impure people, by killing them. And Getty? So you have one group says, I'm going to kill Muslims and make a better world. I'm going to kill Christians and Jews and make a better world. God will love me for purifying the world of these elements. But then in the center, you have Bibi saying, I have a universal love for everyone.
Yeah, but
I have redemption, latzor tshuva, astaghfirullah, for all of them. And those differences fall away.
But the thing about Bibi, and she can't speak for herself, but maybe one of you can respond.
She often does.
She does.
Especially when she's at home.
She does. I'm saying she's not here with us now. She does come across as an aberrational character, that she's there's something truly special about her, and that in fact, there may not be many of her in other mosques around the world.
It's not that so much that it's special. Look, I showed the film at Masjid al-Rahman in Queens, New York, this past Friday. It is that you don't get airplay often by being kind and loving. That doesn't get attention. So the point of
you're saying that human interest stories, and Joshua, you can jump in here because you're in the entertainment business. You have to get your projects lit and presented, distributed. Is Conrad right when he says that those kinds of stories just do not strike the outlets as something worth telling?
Well, you use the word aberrational for her behavior, and I would say a better word maybe is aspirational.
Mhm.
And because I think we all admire her. Anyone who sees this story, they want to be like her. It's like, wow, I should be more like her. I should welcome the stranger. I should show compassion to others.
Doesn't she use the word, because he seems agitated, she instructs we should be extra kind to Mac? Is that
Yes.
her, or someone else says
She
that?
says that. She says that. And I do think that there is a place for stories like this. There are stories that have positive characters and kind characters who are heroes. There is a place for this in the media landscape, and this film, this film is one of them. This film has, I just found out yesterday that it's been seen by 1.5 million people.
Wow,
And for a short documentary, it's a
it's a
lot of
lot.
people.
It's huge.
So there's an appetite for this
So-
kind of story.
So when you say aspirational, I wonder whether maybe Mac can answer this. How do you respond to people who might say, when the Pew polling surveys went around to Muslim societies throughout the Middle East and Persian Gulf and North Africa, they discovered that in some places like Egypt, 80% of the people believe in a strict adherence to Sharia law, which means very, 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 very strict, positions against infidels, against apostates, right? Those numbers are very alarming. That's why I said the word aberrational, because I would, you can imagine this film, the effect this would have. I'm just curious whether there are mosques that are upset with this depiction. And I wonder whether Mac has heard anything like that. And how do we reconcile this particular mosque in Muncie, Indiana, with, again, a perception of what we're told around the world, Mac?
Well, I have not heard anything negative from any other Islamic groups.
Good.
And I can't speak for all Muslims. I can't, and I don't want to. Okay. But you're going to have people who are going to interpret things, and they're going to relate their culture. They're going to relate their geography. They're going to relate a lot of things to that. I know one of the big messages in the Quran is tolerance. Now, we don't see that a lot in any religion, actually. We can point our finger at all religions and show where there is no tolerance, right? That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means it's not being shown.
But the radical extremists in Islam are obviously pointing to different language. And I'm trying to help our viewers think more critically about the Quran, because it seems as if the language of the Quran can be used in different ways. And unlike, say, other world religions, certainly Judaism and Catholicism, there's really not been a strong reformist movement within Islam. There's no Vatican II like we had with Christianity, or for that matter.
But if you looked at scripture and you looked at the book of Joshua, the book of Joshua says, go to Jericho and kill every man, woman, child, and dog. If you looked at the Hebrew Bible as an expert in these areas, the language is very violent of the number of things. What you show.
I'm just curious, what Jews that you know of that are pointing to those sections of the Old Testament and Torah and are acting out that language?
Yes.
Show me where that is.
Benjamin Netanyahu. So the issue here
Is he really doing that? Is he pointing to the provisions of the?
Well, you could say that I don't think it's on the point we're getting here, because Israel is a very difficult issue. I could say that the motto of the Israeli Defense Force is a quotation from Joshua, which is be strong and courageous. But the issue here is, I don't think that Bibi's actions are an aberrancy. I think what it is they have not gotten the attention. Because when I am at the mosques, and the greatest contributors to the movie with me, I match the money that is given by the Muslim community in the hospitals. Truro is one of the largest medical school systems in the country.
Yeah, you said
And
that.
has as many hijab wearing women as there are Orthodox Jewish women. I think it's really a beautiful thing to say it's just an unexpressed story. So if I could do 10 seconds on a medical metaphor, the aberrancy of cancer is based on 0.1% of mutated DNA. And I would say that the violence that captured Islam and hijacked the religion is based on 0.1 or 1% of mutated religious DNA. And the point of the movie is that we have to point out that the religion was hijacked by violent people in the same way that many people in America have been hijacked by a violent ideology. And this movie is about telling truth. And more people love beauty, goodness, and kindness than there are people who love hatred. And I think that's the message of the movie. And statistically, it's true.
Mac, it does come across. Do you want to add something to that? Because I have something specific for you.
If I may, please.
Sure.
Yeah. So when it comes to it, I always refer to them as the big three: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Okay. Out of all three of those, I shouldn't say all three, but I said I love each and every one of them. I adore the Jewish faith. I adore the Christian faith. I will not say anything bad about any of them. The stuff that's happening around the world, that's a political thing. That really has nothing to do with faith whatsoever. And in Islam, unfortunately, we have certain individuals who will use Holy Scripture to press their agenda.
But isn't that faith? That's not a political issue. Isn't that exactly what political Islam is? It's a political movement that is actually exploiting the language of the Quran.
Well, but you're trying to you're actually making a contradiction in terms, because for anybody who really studies Islam, you can't say political Islam. There is no such thing. It doesn't exist. It's a contradiction in terms. But that doesn't mean there's not going to be individuals that are going to try to press that. Okay. One of the huge problems that we have in Islam, because we are so big, and a lot of the religion is present in third world type countries, that we have an education problem.
No.
So we have a lot of people who cannot read. So they're told what the Quran says. Not much different from the early church, when the only people that could read were the priests and the royalty. So that's, matter of fact, that's how we got the Crusades, right? Because they told people what the Bible said. People had no idea what the Bible said because they couldn't read. And if we had more time, I could give you actual examples that I can say that this is true. And this is how this comes
but we're in the
across.
21st century, though. That's
But we still have ignorance in the world.
Scary part.
We still have a lack of education. So the bigger issue is, how do we get these people educated? So you look at situations like it happened in Afghanistan with the Taliban taking over again, right? What did they do? They closed the schools.
Of course.
You see? And it's so they can press their agenda.
But see, there are people that are going to say, they're going to say, but those people who have taken their countries hostage have taken it hostage under the teaching of Islam. This is what they're doing.
You can say that. It doesn't make it true.
Okay.
Go ahead. They have used the religion for their own personal gains. That's where it becomes evil, and that's why they'll be judged. They'll be judged for that. That is not the religion.
So I'm interested in something that you said in the film about your band of brothers. And I wonder, this is something Joshua and Conrad can jump into as well, because I found what was interesting is that to me, one implication of the film is not just that we have a veteran walking around untreated with PTSD, right? Damage, so to speak, by his years on the battlefield, but also his lack of his band of brothers have been, as he says in the movie, disbanded. I love that he uses that word. He says disbanded. And I wonder whether this movie is a statement for the power of human caring and connection, right? That's really what the movie's about. He says, when I come home from the first day of the Islamic Center, people were hugging my legs. They could not have been more affectionate with me. And it's as if he was starved for the same kind of connection that he got in the military, that he was unmoored from that. And I wonder whether the three of you can maybe speak to that, because clearly then the movie turns and we see a very different Mac, laughing, talking, giving very moving speeches to his new family from the Islamic Center. And we see a new man emerge.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Mac speak to this because this is his life and his story. I'll say that to me, the film is a story of, it's not really a story about faith as much as it is a story about community, the power of community, the power of humanity, to the shared humanity. That's what this film is about to me. But Mac, why don't you pick it up?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Josh is absolutely right. Anybody who watches this film and takes away from it that it's a great story about somebody who converted faith needs to watch it again, because it's not. It's just.
You're saying the takeaway is not that you are now a practicing Muslim. That is not the takeaway.
Absolutely not. It's like I said in the film. Let's put Islam aside for a second. It's about humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Because this subject, my personal prejudice was Islam, okay? But this film can encompass any bias, any prejudice, any hatred. You can put that in the subject and it would be the same film, right? Because this is about overcoming hatred and telling people that it's possible to overcome hatred with love.
You in the movie say at one point, I wrote this down, you said, you gave a very moving speech. I don't know if it was when the first early time that you had converted to Islam and you were being sort of welcomed. It seemed as if it was a party thrown for you. And you say, you showed me what humanity is about. That's a very, very poignant moment in the film and a powerful line. You showed me what humanity is about. It's a very distressing thought, Mac, that you hadn't seen it any other way. Is it because you spent 25 years in the military? Or is it that, no, I've seen it, I just wasn't affected by it. These people really affected me in the way they embraced me, in ways that other people who showed me humanity, it didn't register in the same way.
Well, and I think that your latter explanation is probably closer to true. I did see it, but I had taken myself out of that because that was how I survived, right? There was no humanity. I was more of a tool than anything to accomplish a mission. And I can't let things like humanity get in the way, right? And they were able to explain it to me in a way that it was like, this is beautiful. Where have I been my whole life, man? Well, where's my brain been? Where's my heart been?
Conrad, in your various studies on religious violence, and you've told us how you came to it, can you think of another example of something like this, either with Islam or any of the other world religions, where the conversion process begins with this? Right. We always hear the story about someone, wandering into a church and the next thing you know, they start, coming back. But this is, one of the reasons why this is a must-see movie. You got to watch this is because of go ahead.
St. Paul.
Saul
came up as the #1 attacker on early Christians. The entirety of several epistles in the Christian Bible is Paul saying, I was against this innovation in Judaism. I wanted to purify Judaism of this foul influence. I wanted them killed. The first martyr, Saint Stephen, was killed by Saul and later Paul, encouraging them. In the modern world, we may not hear about it, but that's the point of doing the movie. It is
Because
what
you're
we have-
convinced that this is not unprecedented.
Correct. Correct. Because what you're talking about the scripture, when you speak about verses, can I look at the Quran and say, kill them wherever you find them? Yes, the Surah Al-Saif, as Mac knows, number 9, has some very difficult language, but it's the exegesis as you go when you get a master's degree or doctorate in theology, interpretation of scripture. You see what happened.
Yeah, but wait,
Ages,
hold on, Conrad. That's frightening to me because that's so inside baseball. Mac just told us there are people throughout the world that can't even read, so they're just being told so they're never going to get.
Yes,
to the
but the
subtext.
people who can't read have less representation in groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. In reality, if you look at the leadership of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, the representation by people who have doctorates is at 30%.
Really?
Three times more likely to have graduated college. And so the argument of education at the leadership of those groups doesn't hold up.
Except that how are they misreading the words then? Why with people with doctorates so befuddled by the language and so misguided?
It's the exegesis, the interpretation. For instance, if I told you, it's very Lutheran, the way ISIS reads the Bible is very Lutheran. Sola scriptura, only scripture. Hey, why should I drown every firstborn and kill every firstborn Egyptian son? Hey, it says so in the Bible. But back to the issue of the movie and the story. It's the interpretation.
I see.
You see, the scripture is, I'm submitting to you, is relatively neutral. It is what people do to interpret it. So the point that we have here is a very tiny minority with a loud mouth. That's the point here. Why did I put all my money into this movie?
Because
Angry, violent people were putting their money into loud mouthing a very violent interpretation of scripture. And I don't like it when people hijack other people's religion. It's like when certain Christian figures in America say, I am a Christian nationalist and America is a Christian country. I want to vomit.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Mac, your band of brothers in overseas tours, you have memories of them. I don't know if you still have friendships with them, you have memories of them. Would you say that they would have been similarly benefited, affected, had they had your experience in coming in? Did they return, to your knowledge, to the United States? I know that, and maybe Conrad can speak to this, that PTSD is woefully untested and untreated. But I'm just wondering if you could imagine the faces of some of your brothers, would they have benefited from the experience that you had?
Well, to be honest with you, I'll never know. That picture that comes up of me and some other soldiers,
Yeah.
Their faces were blackened out.
Yeah.
They all committed suicide.
Wow.
I will speak on the fact that the soldiers that I associated with didn't have the hatred for Islam that I had. Matter of fact, to quote a line I was told quite often, this is, Mac, you need to chill. So that's not a military-wide feeling.
You mean
fact,
your remedy for what you thought you needed to do is not something widely felt at all?
No. I was an extremist in my own way.
Mm-hmm. Hey, can you tell us why there's seen, maybe Joshua can tell us, well, there was more footage of it, I just didn't use it. Can you help us through the FBI visit? FBI comes to the door,
Sure.
and you say, at this point, you're on your way to becoming Muslim. and you've got nothing to hide. They're not going to find a bomb in your house. You even say, bring a dog in. I don't care. So what I understand is were they tracking you online? Like why were they there?
Well, I'll let Mac answer, but a lot of people have asked this question. And at the time, Mac had become Muslim, and he was in school with the GI Bill. He was getting his undergrad degree, and one of his professors, Mac confided in his professor. And Mac, why don't you tell it?
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Sure. So you know, being an older person, you know, I graduated college when I was 50, actually.
So you were like you were an interesting student.
Well, yeah.
You stood out. You stood out.
Well, I had a different type of relationship with my professors than the 20-something students, right? Yeah. And I was talking with a professor one time, and I actually told him, I opened up to him and I told him the whole story, the plan and all of this. And she was blown away. She's like, you have got to tell that story because you could change people's lives. I'm like, really? She gave me the next class to actually give that presentation. And I did. And when I did, so I come find out later on that someone in that class decided that it was for the better good that they notify the authorities.
Oh, wow.
And that's how it all came down. The FBI came, and I was very welcoming to them, actually. I allowed them to do whatever they saw necessary to do, you know, but I told them, I says, you know, contrary to popular belief, I'm a Muslim now and I don't need a bomb.
Hey, Mac, if you had not been treated this way, would you have gone through with it?
We'll never know. If you would have asked me this question.
That was great. That was good. That's the mysterious element. Oh, you know what you should say, Dane, if we get financing for a feature, maybe people will find out.
Well, is that because, Mac, when I agree with Conrad, that was the money shot for tonight's hour. So that was a great moment. And Josh was smiling. He's going, yeah, I wish you got to use that somewhere. But I'm wondering, are you saying that now because so many years have gone by and you are you truly are transformed, you are another person, you know, and so it's impossible to think of yourself that way anymore.
It is hard. Unfortunately, I have not forgot that person. But it is hard. It is hard to say. Was I ready to do it? Absolutely. And I'll even go as far as to tell you that the bomb was complete. I was done. I just need to put it in place. But would I've actually done it? Would I have got caught beforehand? I don't know. You know, I really can't say at this point.
So in the movie, you say, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience and we'll say goodnight to you, gentlemen. This was really terrific. And we are all rooting. We have a global audience here. We are rooting for this movie. Stay tuned to the list of winners on Sunday night. In the movie, your former wife has a key role, and your daughter as well. And she intimates, I hope that Mac can forgive himself. That I hope that that's what comes from this. Now, that is a very elliptical thing to say, because that assumes that she's saying, and I believe that my husband has deep regrets about what he was asked to do. She doesn't say it, right? And she doesn't say, and my husband shared with me. She's crying because she's only imagining your world when you weren't with her. But I'm wondering whether that's, and again, if it's too personal a question, you should just say, Thane, it's too personal a question. But is she right when she says that you needed to forgive yourself and your conversion to Islam was part of that process?
Well, yeah, I had struggled with personal forgiveness for years because the things that I did. And it was just, it has been a struggle. Since we have been out, since we have been showing premieres and I have been talking with people, I have forgiven myself because I see the change that this film has made. I would like to take all the credit for myself and say, look what I did, but it's really not all about me. It's about the story, but it involves so many other people, and those other people were very intricate in not only changing me, but others through this film.
I'm going to read a comment that's also a question from one of our viewers, and it fits into a question I would have asked too. She says, Mac's quote about what war does to soldiers is the most concise and adequate explanation I've ever heard. Humanity is the main character here. It must remain so if all of us are to survive. This is really our common denominator if we can only recognize it in each other. The quote about killing one person, you kill all the people, save one person and you save all the people, is also from the Old Testament. We are more the same than not. And then she gets to the question where she says, can we move forward, or is war always the way to solve problems? I wonder whether Joshua believes and Conrad believes that Conrad invested, he got behind an anti-war movie, and Joshua made an anti-war movie. Is that yet another way of thinking about this film?
I think of it as a pro-humanity movie.
Not anti-war per se.
There's an element of that, but I really think of it as pro-humanity, that we this is the big issue of our time, right? It's our issue is that we're divided. Our issue is that we've stopped talking to each other. Our issue is that we don't understand each other anymore. And this idea of building bridges based on our shared humanity is the story here.
Yeah.
It's the story. It's the story of our time, of our times. We need to figure out how to do this. There's a sense of urgency about it.
Mm-hmm. Conrad, you seem to jump on that too. You thought that the film is more.
I agree completely with what Josh just said about pro-humanity, because just saying anti-war would be, right now, the war that's happening is an invasion of Ukraine. And if you said you're anti-war while people were being blown up in their homes, I jumped to Ukraine in the hot war zone. And if you told the people there that need heavy weapons to protect themselves, I'm anti-war because you're getting killed, I wouldn't feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue is pro-humanity and pro doing the right thing with each other. So the other thing, or last thing I want to say about this is, what is engaging about the story is this is not soft soap nonsense about everybody loves everybody. In this case, this is a dude who said, I'm protecting people by killing those people. This is not that namby-pamby bullshit.
Yeah,
and
good point.
What do we do with that? Because just saying to people, everybody loves everybody, that's not going to fly.
You're saying you can't forget in this movie, the beginning of the movie, that you can't overlook the fact that it starts with someone that wants to blow up a mosque. And if you keep that in your head, you will not see this as a kumbaya film. You will recognize.
So Josh and I have talked about this a lot, because as a doctor who works in central Brooklyn, in one of the top 3 penetrating trauma centers in the country, stabs to the heart, multiple gunshot wounds every day. It is by nature to confront that evil and that violence. But the main thing here is that is to be able to say, yes, pro-humanity, that love can conquer hatred, just as it says in scriptures, but at the same time here, recognizing that there are really people who are filled with a violent hatred. And remember that tomorrow there's going to be another mass killing. We don't get to look inside the mind and soul of a mass murderer that often. When do we get to do that?
And this film takes
Before.
us inside. The difference is, and then we've got to say goodnight. The difference is the transformation.
Already?
Yeah, is the transformation. That what's different here is Mac's ultimate response and redemption and change. What we normally see is we only, what we're told is a diseased mind. We're never told that something like this is also possible. And that's what's really, truly unique here. It's something that the three of you should be
But
congratulated.
speaking medically, mass murderers and suicide bombers have no identified mental health issue that fits into any known category.
Right, I'm just
They're
saying,
not-
right, it may not be medically true, but we are told to dismiss them as inhuman and suffering from something. That's what we're told, for them to be dismissed. It may be because it's just too painful to imagine that it's human to do what they do. So we treat them as they're cast off, as they're not actually part of humanity, they're sick. All right, gentlemen, before we say goodnight to the three of you, to Mac, Conrad, see where we got an event, I think next week. Let's see, it's not that one. Yeah, we have a month dedicated to women.
You mean
we
the
have a book-
Oscars on Sunday? We
Yeah,
have an
we're-
event next week?
Yeah, we will.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we have How to Think Like a Woman. We have the author Reagan Petaluna, and that's next Wednesday. By then, we could announce, hopefully, we'll announce to the audience that you guys walked away with an Academy Award. That'll be a big, that'll be, something that we've never been able to say before. So good luck, guys. For those of you that are not already part of our email list, please visit us at folks.org. And of course, we like to think of you that we're providing a service and we're one of your favorite charities. So you can always donate to folks.org. And there's the text and the online donate button. Mac, your story is truly inspirational. You are an extremely compelling human being in every way that human beings are measured. Joshua, you told an amazing story here. And I know that you've dedicated so much of your professional life to this idea. And I can say that's true of many filmmakers, that you've spent, you've had success in every way, Peabody Awards, Emmy nominations, you worked for, large outlets, but this is something that you've never left behind and you should be congratulated for it. And my colleague, Conrad, way to go, a physician and a reverend who decided to put his money in a place that he thought he could do some good in the world. Good night to everyone. I'm Thane Rosenbaum for Folks. Until next time. Good night, everyone. Thank you.